open source models out of China are finally good enough to take on real world tasks. Your business could use these models today to really take off work from your team and accomplish business functions. Why does this matter now? A study from RAMP that studied over 20,000 companies showed that companies that are adopting AI heavily are growing way faster than companies that are not. They looked at over 20,000 companies and they saw that companies that are actually using these AI models are hiring more. Their headcount is growing. But there is one catch. The AI bill is astronomical for a lot of companies. Running AI agents, not only chatbots, but agents that call tools and are able to do actual work, is extremely expensive. It consumes millions and millions of tokens. And these tokens from the frontier are very, very expensive. Some companies like Glyn, a startup that is automating some of their incidents through an AI agent, are spending more than $1 million per month just for this specific business function. And their whole team of 15 people that this agent was supposed to help is less expensive than this bill. And so for a lot of companies, the AI bill is simply just not economical. However, with these open source models, specifically the one coming out of China, finally businesses can take on real agentic work, and the AI bill is finally making sense economically. Pierre, you did some research about the best models out there, specifically the one from China. Do you want to talk a little bit about what are the best models?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that they categorize in maybe like 4 different categories of models and 4 different companies that are creating the best current open source models out there. And these are, and you may have heard of them, they were everywhere on the news a few months back. But we have DeepSeek, we have GLM, we have Qwen, and then we have Kimi. So maybe let's start from DeepSeek, which is kind of like was the first real breakthrough in these open source models, because back in the days, its performance was like very, very remarkable, especially for the price. So today, DeepSeek is run by an AI lab called DeepSeek, and their frontier model is called V4, and it comes in like 2 flavors. You can go with the Flash models or with the Pro model. And the interesting thing is that DeepSeek is a model that starts extremely, extremely cheap. So for AI models, we usually look at their pricing for the cost of 1 million token in input and 1 million token in output, which usually the latter costing more. And DeepSeek comes in at a staggering 0.14 cents per million token in input and about 0.30 cents for millions of token in out. So a remarkable low price for the level of intelligence that this model can provide. Now, this said, this is not a model that is comparable to what the GPT 5.6 and the Claude Fable can offer today in terms of intelligence and in terms of how frontier these models are. However, they are good for volume. So if you need to handle like a lot of volume, if you need to handle chats, if you need to handle everyday tasks, it's a range of models that can be extremely useful at a very, very, very competitive pricing. Then the next model that we mentioned is GLM, in particular with GLM 5.2, which recently released. And now we're going on in a range of prices that is a little bit higher compared to DeepSeek. Now we are talking in the range of like $1.4, $1.5 per million tokens in input and about $4.5 per millions of token in output. So it's definitely a degree above from DeepSeek, and also with the increased prices comes increased intelligence. So this is a model that comes from a lab that is called ZAI, and this model focuses mainly on coding and on agentic tasks. So if today you're trying to build maybe agent or very complicated agent loops, agent flows, this is a model that you may want to consider. And still comparing to the frontier model like GPT 5.6 and Claude Fable, it can compare on certain benchmark, especially when with coding, it gets pretty close. It doesn't beat them across the board. So this is something worth keeping in mind. But the pricing, again, extremely competitive compared to these other models. And then we go to Qwen. We mentioned before, Qwen 3.5 is the latest and best model from the Qwen family. Qwen is the model from Alibaba, is the company behind it, the Chinese giant. And so this is a model that is very reliable, strong, while still being like very cheap. You can get this model for about like 10 cents for million token in input and 30 cents for million of token in output. So again, this is comparable to DeepSeek. We're talking about a model that is extremely cheap. And something interesting to say about Qwen is that it's very good for multilingual stuff. So if you're operating your business out of like a language that is not English, or you serve customers from different locations in the world, this can be maybe the model that you want to choose. And then we get to finally the talk of the town for the past few weeks, which has been Kimi K3. And Kimi, we've seen Kimi, different range of Kimi models that came out in the past few months, but K3 was really an incredible breakthrough. It's definitely more expensive compared to the other models, coming in at about $3 per million of token in input and $15 for million token in output. So as you can see, it's definitely much more expensive compared to the other models. However, now we are talking about a level of intelligence that is comparable on certain benchmark to GPT 5.6 and Claude Fable. So it was really an important breakthrough because finally we see a model that is drastically cheaper compared to the frontiers, while still challenging on certain benchmark the frontier model. So this is a model that is extremely good at coding, extremely good at front-end work, especially, we've seen online on Twitter, people releasing entire apps, incredibly deep and complicated, with very complex UI shaders. They were completely developed with Kimi K3. And so this is definitely a model that is very, very strong at coding and also agentic task. So it's something that you may want to consider if that's your line of work. So these are the main open source models. We talk about their prices and the open source. So I think it's fair that we compare it to the current prices for GPT 5.6 and Claude Fable. Currently, 5.6 comes in at about $5 per millions of token in input and $30 per million token in output, while Fable is even more expensive at $10 in input and $50 in output. So as you can see, these models are, these open source Chinese models that we talk about are drastically cheaper compared to these models, even the most expensive ones. So we talked about the models. How can you get them today? How can you use them? How can you implement them in your workflow? The easiest one to get started with are, of course, DeepSeek and Kimi. They offer a free web chat UI where you can just like sign up, and they offer free tokens to chat for free, or they offer you even a subscription. For anybody looking to build apps, a complex application that needs maybe different models, definitely the best way to go about it is through OpenRouter. OpenRouter is a platform that provides all these four models in one interface and one subscription, basically, to then manage and provide these models to your application, to your users, and so on and so forth. For coding, for everybody that may be used to use Claude Code or Codex, you can do basically the comparative software would be OpenCode. OpenCode is basically an open source alternative to Claude Code and Codex, where you can interact and run these Chinese open source models. So instead of being limited to just GPT or Anthropic, you can now use pretty much any models that we mentioned today that you want. So that's for like building the actual software. And then lastly, of course, because these models are all open source and open weight, you can just download the weights and you can run them in your local machine if you have a machine powerful enough through services like Olama. So that can be like a good way to keep it fully local and fully private. Okay, so these models are cheaper compared to the frontier one, but have we seen anybody actually using these models and implementing them in real work, in real companies, in real businesses? And the answer is yes. And Simo, you looked into this recently, right?
Yes. As you said, these models are way cheaper than the frontier. And so one example, the flagship story is probably the one of Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, the crypto exchange. He was able to cut his AI spending almost in half by doing a couple of things. One, by using these Chinese open source models as the default option for all the Coinbase employees. And two, by being able to implement sort of like a smart router that can basically decide where each task which model each task should pick. And so the employees can basically decide when to use something more powerful like Claude for like heavy coding sessions maybe, but usually default to cheaper open source models for everyday tasks. And they were able to cut their spending in half, but also at the same time, they were able to increase their AI usage. So that's an interesting pattern over there. At the same time, companies like Shopify and Airbnb, they've been using Qwen for doing exactly the same thing. Shopify saw much faster results in less time, about 2 times as fast as previous models, while reducing costs by 68%. So huge results by big enterprises in the US by adopting these AI models. And so why does this matter for your business? So as AI is becoming more and more powerful and can take on real work for your business, AI builds are becoming the standard, sort of like cloud builds for today's websites. However, picking the right model matters a lot for everyday tasks because at scale, the choice of the model will actually make a big change in the AI bill. And so you should definitely today implement and start using open source Chinese models. And you should be very smart in your choice of AI model when you're about to do your coding sessions or you're about to do your AI session for your business function. And so the bottom line is the winner is not going to be the company that has access to the smartest model because everybody will be able to rent that. But the winner will be the company that will be able to understand the work that deserves the best model and the work that deserves 1/10 of the cost.
If you found this insight useful and if you got anything useful out of it today that you can implement in your business, follow us for more as we dive deeper into other topics that can help you increase productivity in your business and decrease spending. So follow the Modern Company podcast on Spotify and YouTube, and we'll see you soon.